Okay, so before we get into this, three friends of Nolan Wells just did something their own attorneys are calling emotional, necessary, and, in the same breath, not evidence. Warren Hudson and Jax Pitalo walked back onto Horn Island this past Friday, more than a month after Nolan's body was found on that same shoreline. 3 hours on the island, and their lawyers told reporters, in advance, that nothing gathered on that trip would count as evidence.
We're at Horn Island in almost the exact same position where the boards were, where Nolan was. So if you look out right here, just so you guys can get a perspective, you have the Horn Island here, but I want you guys to put this in your mind, what this was like on that day.
You know, there's plenty of people out here, especially on the 4th of July. You know, this is where people come out to celebrate. And I mean, if you film the water, you can see right here, Brandon, where it drops off. I mean, you can see literally where it drops off. So, I mean, it goes from about waist deep water right there to neck deep. And then it drops from neck deep all the way to like 17, 20 foot. I mean, we weren't even a quarter mile out the island and when we were leaving, and I mean, it was 30 foot of water.
You have boats 2, 3, 4 deep from way down there where you can see all the way through here. You have thousands of people on this island, probably 2,000 people. So this wasn't some abandoned, secluded island where nobody's at. Obviously, this is a Monday, and there's a few people on the backside of the island, not a lot of people here. But on 4th of July, this is a celebration. And so this wasn't a small place where 4 boys took their black friend and dropped him off and never seen him again. This place was flooded with people. Tons of people, multiple boats, multiple friend groups. I mean, everybody's here having a good time. And then the boat gets towed out because it was getting ready to sink. And so, and from what I was told, they told Nolan, get on the boat, man, get on the boat, get on the freaking boat. And he decided, because he's an adult, that he was gonna stay behind. And all the boys that they've been accusing, and they saying it had something to do with his death, they were all gone at 4:30.
Sit with that for a second. The two people who were physically present with Nolan on July 4th, walking the exact ground where he disappeared, and their own legal team is the one telling you up front it doesn't count. So what was it actually for? And here's the detail almost nobody covering this story has connected yet. The man running the real investigation, Sheriff John Ledbetter, someone with no reason to take either side, has already gone on record saying something that directly contradicts the account these friends have given from day one. We're going to walk through exactly what happened on that island Friday, what their attorneys actually said, and why the sheriff's own words might matter more than anything these three men do or don't find walking that beach. Before we go further, if you are new here, this channel breaks down real documented cases using real sources, no speculation dressed up as fact. Subscribe to True Crime Revealed so you do not miss where this case goes next. Let's start with exactly what happened, because the specifics here matter more than the headline. According to CNN, more than a month after Nolan Wells' body was found along the shoreline of Horn Island, two friends believed to have traveled out to the island with him, Warren Hudson and Jax Pitalo, returned there in an effort to investigate the case themselves. That's according to their attorneys, Edward Andrew Paltzik and J. Tyler Cox, who confirmed the visit directly to CNN. The two went to the island Friday afternoon specifically to, in their attorney's own words, investigate the layout and dynamic. A third friend, Morgan Seymour, had initially been expected to join them as well, though reporting on whether he actually made it out to the island that day varies slightly across outlets. What's confirmed consistently is this. The attorneys told CNN on Friday night that the group was on the island for about 3 hours, and here's their exact characterization of what that afternoon felt like. It was a very emotional afternoon for Warren and Jax, the attorneys said in a statement. Now, notice the word choice there. Emotional. Not investigative, not evidentiary. Emotional. That's the word their own legal team chose to describe a trip explicitly framed, in the same breath, as part of an investigation into Nolan's death. Hold on to that tension because it's going to come back. It's worth pausing here to establish something important about where Horn Island actually sits, physically and legally, because it shapes everything about why a trip like this even matters. According to the National Park Service, Horn Island is part of the Gulf Islands National Seashore, a barrier island south of Ocean Springs, Mississippi, with no shelter, no facilities, and no communications. This is not a developed tourist destination with lifeguards and cell towers. It's a slice of genuine wilderness, the kind of place people go specifically to get away from everything, and the kind of place where, if something goes wrong, there's no infrastructure to help you. The barrier islands in this stretch of the Mississippi coast have a documented history of powerful currents and drowning deaths, a detail that matters when you're weighing the different explanations for what happened to Nolan, but a detail that Nolan's family's attorney, Ben Crump, has publicly voiced skepticism about applying to this specific case. So, 3 friends walked back into that exact environment more than a month after the fact with their attorneys. Now let's talk about what their attorneys actually said the purpose of that trip was, and why the specific wording deserves real scrutiny. According to TMZ, which first broke news of the planned visit, attorneys Cox and Paltzik said in a joint statement that they, along with their clients, planned to inspect the island's layout and dynamics as they began investigating Nolan's death on behalf of Hudson, Pitalo, and Seymour. That phrase, layout and dynamics, is doing a lot of work here. It suggests something almost architectural, understanding the physical geography, the sight lines, the distances between where the boats were anchored and where Nolan was last seen. But then comes the detail that actually reframes the entire trip. TMZ reported explicitly that the group stressed they would not be gathering evidence during the visit. Paltzik, according to TMZ, simply needed to lay eyes on the island himself. Think about what that combination of statements actually tells you. This was not framed as a forensic walkthrough. It was not framed as an attempt to locate physical evidence, to identify witnesses, to test timelines against terrain. It was framed by their own attorneys as something closer to a personal, visual, emotional experience for the 2 people who were there that day, paired with a lawyer who simply wanted to see the place himself. That's not nothing. There's real value in an attorney understanding the physical reality of a location before building a legal strategy around it. But it's also worth being honest about what this visit was not. It was not an independent forensic investigation in any technical sense. Nobody involved has claimed otherwise. And that distinction matters enormously for how you should interpret whatever comes out of this trip going forward, whether that's public statements from the attorneys, details shared with media, or arguments eventually made in a legal setting. Now let's talk about why these 3 young men and their attorneys felt the need to do this in the first place, because that context reveals a lot about where things currently stand for them. According to multiple outlets, the trio's legal team is actively reviewing mainstream and social media coverage of Nolan's death for what they describe as potentially defamatory statements. Separately, Hudson, Pitalo, and Seymour were part of a GiveSendGo fundraiser, a crowdfunding campaign, in which they claimed they have been targeted with death threats and defamation since this case became national news. Their attorneys have been direct and unambiguous in their public characterization of their clients. Cox and Paltzik said they're proud to stand with and fight for 3 completely innocent young men, adding that the 3 had, in their words, nothing whatsoever to do with the tragic death of Nolan Wells. It's worth being fair and precise here. These are strong, direct claims of innocence, made publicly, by name, by licensed attorneys representing these 3 young men. As of this recording, none of the 3 have been charged with any crime. None have been named by law enforcement as suspects. That is an important, factual baseline to establish clearly before we go any further, because everything else in this story has to be understood against that backdrop. At the same time, it's worth noting that a legal team actively working to counter what they call defamatory coverage, while simultaneously raising money through a public fundraiser specifically citing threats and reputational harm, tells you something real about the environment these three young men are currently living inside. This is not a quiet, private legal matter. It has become a public battle over narrative, playing out simultaneously with the actual investigation into how Nolan died. Now here's where we get to the contradiction that matters most in this entire update, the one that isn't coming from an anonymous online commenter or a rival attorney with an obvious interest in the outcome, but from the sheriff himself, the person actually leading the investigation into Nolan's death. According to CNN, Sheriff John Ledbetter told the outlet weeks after Nolan's death something specific and direct about who Nolan was as a person. "I've never known Nolan to stay back while his friends leave," he said. "He's always been a guy where if he rode with you, he's going to come back with you. That's always how he's been every single time." Read that again, because the specificity matters every single time. This is not a vague, generic character reference. This is the sheriff, someone whose job requires him to remain neutral, to follow evidence rather than narrative, characterizing a consistent, lifelong behavioral pattern that directly contradicts the central explanation Nolan's friends have given from the very beginning, that Nolan simply chose to stay behind on the island because he'd met a young woman and wanted to keep talking with her. This is the same core tension Nolan's own parents, Christine and Elmore Wansley, have raised publicly and repeatedly. But when it comes from them, it's easy, understandably, to file it away as grieving parents who simply can't accept what happened. It's much harder to file it away the same way when it comes from the sheriff. So notice what we actually have here. Three separate independent sources: Nolan's mother, Nolan's father, and now the sheriff investigating his death, all describing the same consistent pattern. And on the other side, three friends with attorneys, describing a specific departure from that pattern on the one day it mattered most. Now, to be genuinely fair to Warren Hudson, Jax Pitalo, and Morgan Seymour, because this video has to hold both possibilities honestly, there is a real, documented piece of evidence that complicates this picture and actually supports part of their account. According to TMZ's reporting, sources with direct knowledge said authorities have evidence that apparently shows Wells still on Horn Island after the boat his friends were on departed. Specifically, at least two witnesses who were interviewed by law enforcement said they saw Wells on the island after the boat his friends were on headed back to the mainland. Sit with that for a second, because it genuinely complicates the story we just laid out. If independent witnesses, people separate from Nolan's three friends, told investigators they saw Nolan on the island after the boat left, that's real corroboration for at least part of the friend's account, that Nolan was, in fact, still on Horn Island when the boat departed, rather than something happening to him before that point. This doesn't resolve the deeper question of why he stayed, or what happened to him afterward, but it does mean we can't simply dismiss the friend's account wholesale. Multiple things can be true at once here. Nolan may genuinely have remained on the island after the boat left, exactly as his friends have said, while the reason he stayed, and what happened to him during however many hours followed, remains entirely unresolved and unexplained by anyone. This is worth genuinely sitting with, because it shows you why this case has resisted easy conclusions from either direction. The sheriff's characterization of Nolan's personality creates real doubt about the explanation his friends have offered for why he stayed. Independent witness accounts appear to support the basic fact that he did, in fact, stay. Both of those things being true simultaneously is exactly the kind of unresolved tension that makes a case like this so difficult to responsibly report on, and exactly why a formal, thorough investigation, not viral video clips, not social media theories, not even a 3-hour visit by friends and their attorneys, is what's actually required to sort out what happened. Now let's talk about the audio, because it's connected to this same broader pattern of disputed, partial evidence circulating around this case. TMZ obtained enhanced audio of a teenager on the boat calling a private towing company, Sea Tow, around 4 in the afternoon as the vessel began taking on water near Horn Island. Some internet sleuths believe someone can be heard in the background of that call, roughly 12 seconds in, saying, "Is he dead?" It is genuinely unclear what is actually being discussed in the background of that recording. This is a critical distinction to hold on to. An enhanced audio clip, interpreted by unofficial online analysts, is not the same thing as a confirmed forensic transcription. We are not going to tell you what that background audio says, because nobody outside a formal forensic review actually knows for certain. What we can tell you is that this disputed clip has become part of the broader environment of contested, partial evidence surrounding this case. The same environment that makes something like a friends and attorneys visit to the island feel, to a lot of people following this story, like it needs to happen, even if it technically produces nothing usable as evidence. Let's talk about where the official investigation actually stands right now, because this context matters for understanding why everyone involved, the family, the friends, and their respective legal teams, feels pressure to be doing something visible right now. According to reporting from late last week, the official autopsy for Nolan has been completed, but it has not yet been released to the public. Separately, Nolan's family, through their attorney, hired and paid for an out-of-state medical examiner to conduct an independent examination of his body. As we've covered in prior updates on this case, that independent examination has previously described the cause and manner of death as undetermined, pending further investigation, a status that, as of this recording, has not publicly changed. The Jackson County District Attorney has stated that Nolan's case is a priority for her office, and has said she will forward any law enforcement findings to a grand jury, which will determine whether any charges are warranted. That process, as we've explained in earlier videos, does not indicate that criminal charges are confirmed or even expected. It's the standard procedure in this jurisdiction for unnatural or suspicious deaths, but it does mean that, eventually, whatever the sheriff's department, the state medical examiner, and the family's own independent investigation ultimately produce will be placed in front of a panel of citizens who will have to weigh all of it together. Now it's worth addressing directly something that runs underneath this entire story, because ignoring it would be dishonest, and handling it carelessly would be equally irresponsible. Nolan Wells was black. His three friends, Warren Hudson, Jax Pitalo, and Morgan Seymour, are white. Many observers, including Nolan's family's attorney Ben Crump, have publicly raised the possibility that race has been a factor in how this case has been investigated and covered. This is a real, documented part of the public conversation surrounding this case, and it deserves to be acknowledged plainly, rather than either amplified without basis or ignored entirely. At the same time, it's important to be precise about what has actually been established versus what remains an open question people are raising. No court, no investigator, and no independent forensic body has concluded that race played a specific, provable role in any decision made in this investigation. What we can say factually is that this dimension of the story exists, that it has been raised by credentialed public figures, including a civil rights attorney directly representing Nolan's family, and that it forms part of the broader context in which every other development in this case, including this island visit, is being publicly received and interpreted. So, let's bring this together and be honest about what this island visit actually tells us, and what it doesn't. It tells us that Warren Hudson and Jax Pitalo and potentially Morgan Seymour felt enough pressure, whether from public scrutiny, from a genuine desire to understand what happened, or some combination of both, to physically return to the exact location where their friend disappeared, more than a month after the fact, with legal counsel present. It tells us their attorneys are simultaneously building a public case for their client's complete innocence, while also reviewing media coverage for potential defamation claims. A posture that reflects genuine legal strategy in response to intense public scrutiny, not necessarily anything about what actually happened to Nolan. It tells us that the sheriff's own characterization of Nolan's personality creates a real, documented, on-the-record contradiction with the central explanation his friends have offered from day one. And it tells us that independent witness accounts appear to support at least part of that same explanation, the basic fact that Nolan did remain on the island after the boat departed, even if the reason why remains entirely unresolved. What it doesn't tell us is what actually happened to Nolan Wells during however many hours passed between that boat leaving and whatever ultimately led to his death being confirmed 2 days later. A 3-hour visit to inspect layout and dynamics, explicitly not gathering evidence, was never going to answer that question, and nobody involved has claimed otherwise. What it may do, according to the only stated purpose their own attorneys have offered, is help Hudson, Pitalo, and Seymour, and their legal team, better understand the physical reality of where their friend was last seen alive, information that could matter significantly if this case does eventually proceed toward more formal legal proceedings, whether that's the grand jury process already set in motion, or the defamation claims their attorneys are reportedly reviewing on their behalf. We are going to continue following this case as the official autopsy results are eventually released, as the grand jury process moves forward, and as whatever comes out of this island visit, if anything becomes public, gets weighed against everything else we already know. We'll bring you those developments the moment they're verified, and not before. That's everything we have for you on this update. If you want to understand this case through what's actually documented, not speculation, not viral clips taken out of context, make sure you're subscribed to True Crime Revealed so you don't miss what comes next. Drop a like if you think the sheriff's own words deserve more attention than they're currently getting, and let us know in the comments what you think an island visit like this could actually accomplish. 3 hours, no evidence gathering, more than a month after the fact. What do you think they were really hoping to find? Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next update.